some of the challenges that 1 year post-admission graduates are facing?
I think I'm the best person to answer that.
Rose will be the best person to.
Okay, let's answer that question and see what you have been doing to try and remedy the situation now that you faced similar challenges in 2010. So, Rose, what are some of the challenges you have faced?
I think we are going to need to start counting.
One by one.
Okay, let's start with the period after you finish KSL, Kenya School of Law, and you start doing your pupillage. As I told you earlier, I call it the grey area because you're not under the protection of Kenya School of Law or the Law Society of Kenya, which means you're left open to a lot of exploitation by older members of the Law Society. Starting from salaries, young lawyers are being given as low as 5,000 shillings as salary.
That's monthly?
Monthly. Young lawyers are being used as clerks. Young lawyers are being used as messengers in offices. And all these, a young lawyer cannot complain because you are required to do pupillage. And getting pupillage is also proving very hard each day for the young advocate.
Do you have some guidelines that, when you go for pupillage, there's some stipulated guidelines that I'm not going to be a messenger or I'm not going to be a clerk? Or you are at the mercy of the...
You're actually, if for example, he's my senior as we speak, he gets to dictate the terms for me. The only thing that the Kenya School of Law will state is that you need to do pupillage in a law firm. And if you don't do pupillage in a law firm and you do it in a corporate setting, you'll only do 3 months in the corporate settings and then 3 months in the law firm. So who gets to decide my salary? He gets to decide my salary. If he decides, I'm not going to pay her this month, there's nothing you can do.
But you can seek you can seek redress from LSK?
LSK, let me give you an answer I was given personally when I raised the issues a while back. I was told, you are a pupil. You are not yet an advocate, which means that the Law Society of Kenya cannot touch you. You are not their member, so they have no obligation to you. Which is one of the issues that we have been vocal, very vocal, under the age limit must fall hashtag. This is because we need to have a pupillage act, if I may call it that, in place that guides on how you can do your pupillage, what your remuneration shall be, what you should be doing under that pupillage. Not coming into the office in the morning to clean the office, to cook tea, to also be the receptionist as well as be the messenger and the clerk. No, you are an advocate, or you're an advocate to be. This used to be a profession that made you feel like you have achieved in life. Right now, it's just another confused mess. And we do not want to be part of a confused mess. And as young advocates, we have come up. We want change in the Law Society. We want an actual international body, not a verbal international body.
So, Charles, you faced similar tribulations, but I want to believe you are not cooking tea and doing all those type of things. That's in 2010. Of course, no. But you listen to the grievances that she's raising, and you want to be LSK council member, Nairobi County, the representative. What is it that you envision you want to do to try and remedy what seems to be glaring grievances that she seems to raise?
Well, you see, the reason as to why professionals come up together and form a society, like now the one that we have, the Law Society of Kenya, is the fact that you want to make better the welfare and the living conditions of your members. Unless I am mistaken, there is no other reason as to why professionals will join hands, form a society for any other reason. Now, the issue that arises will then be, what are these issues that the Law Society, or what are the issues that this society is supposed to be mandated to do? Now, my junior colleague raises very pertinent issues, and all of them you can see are touching on the welfare. Look at the amount of time that has been invested. Look at the amount of energy. Look at the amount of resources financially that have been pumped in to get someone admitted to the bar, only to come and clean your office, only to come and get a salary of 5 or 10,000 or 15,000. You'll see the paradox in that. And the issue my colleague raises is that the body that should manage the affairs of advocates, and more particularly, the office holders who are coming on board. Now, us as the LSK representatives, we are looking at getting issues to do with the welfare of members to be more improved. We are looking at generally issues to do with their salary and remuneration. We are looking at generally the conduct or the way in which they can foster a good practice of the law so they are able to earn a living from what they do on a daily basis. But
LSK has been into existence for several years, and yes, these are issues that have been there, because some of the things that she's raising are things that we have had candidates year in, year out, promise that they're going to do. So this seems to be another, floodgate of promises that we're going to do this, we're going to do this, but then once you get power, you know what some scholars say, that power corrupts.
Yeah, and absolutely. So power corrupts.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how sure can we be that some of the things you are saying, if you took over the leadership of LSK, for example, that you're not just going to be doing the same thing?
Actually, for me, personally, I didn't submit my papers because I was looking for political clout. I have actually zero interest in politics. I submitted my papers because this is something I have personally gone through. And remember, I do not come from a rich family. I come from a lower than middle class family. My parents rely on me to provide. So if and I believe I am better placed than most of other people, do not do something about it, another person in a worse off position than me is going to suffer more. So I happened to get the access to the platform that would enable change. So I decided to take the bull by the horns. I am not here to go and sit for, is it 2 years or 4 years? Yeah. 2 years. It's not my job to go and sit there and say, put on my CV, I was an LSK Nairobi representative member. No, I want actual change. And the other thing, as I was highlighting the issues of young advocates, technology is coming and moving very fast. And the legal sector, you have to agree with me, operates at a snail pace when it comes to change. Personally, I left the law practice industry and opened my own tech firm because I could not take any more of this abuse found in law firms. So I opened my own tech company, which allows advocates to be found by you as an advocate, which means I have devolved all this clout that was in the law firms and taken it straight to your Android phone.
One will argue that you are running away from the problem.
I'm not running away from the problem. I am finding an alternative solution to the problem. Because there's no way I was going to be able to do anything while working under the ambit of a law firm. And I do not yet have enough connections with clients to open my own law firm and support myself. So tech was the way to go for me. And there are a few other tech startups in the legal profession where people have gone through the same thing as I have. And they decided, let me just go into tech and leave all this nonsense that is being found in the legal industry away from there. Now, what I was trying to say is, the app is called Lawyer, L-O-Y-A. Lawyer connects you to an advocate, right? You get to deal with me. That is one of the changes currently in the legal tech industry in Kenya. I'm not talking about the rest of the world, I'm talking about Kenya. Secondly, there is another app in the legal industry still, where you get to call a lawyer and talk to them and they're charged by the minute. Still in which legal industry? This legal industry. There are websites that provide access for you to legal documents, which means you need minimal contact with a lawyer, which means we are slowly losing what I would call initially, lawyers are everything. You had to talk to a lawyer to get everything done. But now there are alternative legal solutions. And we need, as a law society, we need to admit that alternative legal solutions are coming up, and we need to address that. If you look at currently, you can register a company on eCitizen, right? Now, initially, young lawyers used to make their money out of company registration. Because you knew very well, actually currently in the advocate remuneration order, you need to charge 60,000 to register a company. However, right now, if you go to town, in the middle of town, and walk into any cyber, anybody can register for your company. Which means the income that the young advocate had from registering companies is gone. Now, people used to do a lot of transfer of motor vehicles as advocates. That is also gone because you can do it on the NTSA portal.
So in other words, you're saying that technology seems to be biting hard when it comes to
it has kicked They're behind. And so it means we have to also, should I say, revolutionize the legal industry. And for somebody like me, whose income was based on these actual sources of income that have been automated, I need an alternative. I need to figure out a different way to make my income. But somebody like him who has been over 2 years in practice, he has had the time to create a network of clients. He has alternative sources of income. He can even go ahead and get tenders without having any problems. But for me, it's not.
It will raise issues.
Because
I want us to look at a very sensitive area, which I consider another sensitive area, and I want to believe you at Parklands. Perhaps, I'm just assuming, and that's University of Nairobi School of Law, or whichever school you are in. Yeah. And after 4 years of study, you have done your Bachelor of Laws, and you have graduated, you got Kenya School of Law. And there's an argument that Kenya School of Law has been turned into a money-minting business, where you go sit for an examination and you are deliberately failed, so that you pay, is it 25,000, is it 30,000? You know yourself, and perhaps you face those challenges. Charles, does it bother you as you vie for this particular position? And perhaps did you face this? Did you face these challenges at Kenya School of Law?
Oh, well, let me say this. As to whether the question of the mass failures from the Kenya School of Law is business-oriented or a restrictive measure to sieve the number of advocates in the society, that might be a discussion for another day. But all we do...
But I want us to do today.
Yeah. All that we know, of course, is that where in an academic system, a threshold, a threshold which is commonly referred to as a marking scheme is well laid down, there is a normal graph of how ordinarily students will perform in an exam. Now, when you find an exam whereby 80% of the students who sat that exam fail the paper, then of course there is reason to question that. Of course, there has been largely an argument that a particular office is trying to restrict the number of advocates who are being churned out into the public by trying to lower the number of admissions. And I don't know how true that is, but that's just my opinion.
As a candidate, I want to believe that you should have done your homework regarding this particular issue. So is it true?
Well, it is not one of the reasons I intend to look into, because you see that does not affect the welfare of advocates in the sense that the students have not yet crossed over to this particular area. And largely you'll find that's the reason why possibly that issue has not been raised.
So we should be fighting for the students.
That's why, like in my manifesto, we are trying to include the membership of the law society, to include anyone who has been admitted to the Kenya School of Law, to now anyone with a maximum number of years of practice. Because basically what we are saying, after you have graduated, you become a lawyer. So you only go to the Kenya School of Law as an advocate in waiting.
Maxwell, I feel like I need to...
Martin.
My senior here is being very diplomatic in his response.
Yes.
I don't really like hiding behind a curtain. I state things as they are. And I'm going to tell you something that I found out and I was shocked. I posted about this whole Kenya School of Law and CLA on my Facebook page. I was asking, what is the cause of all these mass failures? And then somebody commented, somebody I knew back when I was in undergrad, somebody I knew very well, had never attended Kenya School of Law, and somebody who is not an advocate, who clearly told us they mark the papers. The only thing he did, he went and did his master's and came back. So somebody who's only done theory is marking our papers. And remember, Kenya School of Law is supposed to be a practical school. So it's like you with your training, there's that particular level where you actually have to sit here, interview somebody, get the experience, so that now in future you can train somebody or you can show somebody else what to do. So imagine now somebody who has never sat here, who has never done the interview for you, coming and telling you what to do. Now this person, of course they have a master's degree, yay for them. But why is it that they're given this authority to come and mark our papers, which are practical papers, practice experience which they do not have? And then, they had the audacity to tell us students in the Kenya School of Law are idiots. They're giving us stupid answers in their results. I mean, what is that?
When they do not understand the profession?
Exactly, because you see, I call it baptism by fire. Going through Kenya School of Law is baptism by fire. And right now, Kenya School of Law only teaches you, and CLE sets and marks the exams.
CLE being?
Council of Legal Education. So these are two different bodies that you have to go through before you can even be gazetted. Right now, Kenya School of Law only teaches you, and CLE sets and marks the exams.
CLE being?
Council of Legal Education. So these are two different bodies that you have to go through before you can even be gazetted to be an advocate. That is why I call it baptism by fire. You are never sure which side the scale will tip for you. So I do not understand what justification that CLE has to go and get people who have zero experience in the profession, who have zero understanding of what you go through to get to that particular level, who do not even understand practice. I mean, if you are asked a civil litigation question, you need to have done the practice to understand what goes on in this courtroom. If you are asked a commercial law question, you need to understand what happens in commercial law before you are allowed to do what? To mark a commercial law paper. So this is why, you know, it's got to a point where my colleagues and I were so displeased with how things were being carried out, and every time you ask when you're in Kenya School of Law, you're told the usual answer, oh no, you do not fall under the ambit of the Law Society of Kenya, so we can do nothing.
What's the consequence of failing the Kenya School of Law?
Okay, so,
is there any fee, or you just...
Of course there is. No. You fail, for example, I failed one paper. I failed a civil litigation paper, and I'm proud to say so. So I failed a civil litigation paper with a few points, which meant I could do either one of two things. Pay for a remark, which was 15,000 of that particular paper, or pay for a receipt, which was 10,000 shillings. Now remember, let's say Friday this week is the deadline for payments. So you're going to have to pay either your 10,000 or your 15,000 by Friday, the end of this week. Now, you are never sure that you're going to get those extra marks that you're looking for in the remark to enable you to not do the receipt, which means you have to pay for both the remark and the receipt, which is roughly 25,000 Kenya shillings.
So that just in case?
Just in case. You always, as in, it's so annoying, you always have to play the probabilities game. If I don't get this, at least I'll have this. So I paid my 25,000. The remark was done, and of course, I was not given those extra points, so I had to do the receipt. Now, a friend of mine paid for the remark and didn't pay for the receipt because he only needed 1 point to get the pass. And they failed him in the remark for that 1 point. So he couldn't do the receipt, so he had to wait for the next lot, which would have been the following year, before he can do his receipt, which means those are another 6 months you have to wait outside the profession before you do your receipt. And on top of that, remember, you might have to wait another 6 months before you are gazetted, and another 6 months before you are admitted to the bar.
And Charles, a very painful experience, by the way. And Charles, you say these are things you're not sure that happens.
Yeah. George, let me clarify something. Martin, sorry. Martin, what is clearly coming out from the presentation that my colleague is making is that then there is need for us to have advocates who are even 1 year old in practice to come and look into these matters. You can see I have 7 years post-admission experience, and you can see the kind of disconnect that is between me and what is happening at the School of Law. Why will that be so? As an admitted advocate, I will only be concentrating on matters to do with practice areas, our welfare as advocates, you know, future-proofing our professions and so on.
But these are issues that never began yesterday. They've been there for some time, even pre-2010.
I think she was clear that there's been a trend that of late now the failures are becoming more and more by the day. So, and I don't think this was an issue when I was a student at the Kenya School of Law. I mean, the number of failures were, you'd get a normal range of failures within papers, but in the recent past, we've had even to go to court to litigate on behalf of some of those students for the high number of failures that they are witnessing. And what I was trying to say, Martin, is this. She then makes a good point for the issue of why we need a wide range of age experience in the representative of lawyers, so that we are able to capture. If you get a 25-year-old post-admission experienced advocate in the council, rarely will he get into the issues of Kenya School of Law. I mean, he is 25 years older than than it is for him to use. I mean, he's way older for School of Law issues, and he'd be concerned with things that are, you know, pressing on him. I think she makes a good case for such a scenario.
And so the question will be, come February 22nd, and Rose, you are elected as a Nairobi LSK Council representative. What is it you want to do to remedy the afflictions you cite in the case of Kenya School of Law?
Okay, first and foremost, I have a friend. I didn't ask his permission to mention his name, but he's already moving forward to register a Young Lawyers Association and come up with a draft Pupillage Act that is going to cover the students in the Kenya School of Law and pre-admission. However, my goal is pretty simple. We need to incorporate the students who are in the Kenya School of Law and the young advocates into our system. We become part and parcel, which means if the Law Society of Kenya is going to come up with regulation, if it's going to be addressing issues, it needs to be addressing issues from Kenya School of Law onwards, which is something I'm going to be very vocal about. That is not something I'm willing to let go, because I have felt the pain. Secondly, there's an issue which you did not raise. I don't know if it was because of politeness or... the issue of sexual harassment to young female... Actually, I shouldn't say young female advocates. I should say young advocates in general, because it has actually crossed the line to both male and female advocates.
By their seniors?
By their seniors. For example, if I want a job from him, he'll take a look at me and tell me, can I buy you dinner in the evening at the Hilton or the hotel or at the Intercontinental? Remember, I am fresh out of law school, so I'm still living with my parents, probably. Or I still live in my cabin sitter somewhere where I cannot go home past a particular time. So he tells you, come, I buy you dinner at this hour in this particular place so that we can discuss your job. Now, you think discussing my job is going to be talking about what my qualifications are, what my expectations are? No. It's going to be, if you want this job, I have booked a room. You can either come with me to the room or give up the job. That is the situation we are facing as of today. Or something I saw firsthand. During interviews, the people who are shortlisted for a particular pupillage job, it's based on how your photo looks, so they ask you to send a passport photo. So if you're considered ugly, it's set aside, it's put aside, and then the pretty ones are selected. Once you come...
I can see George smiling, so...
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
I don't know if it started happening after I graduated or what, but I have seen it happen. Once you come for the interview, they look at you. How do you look in person? So if they feel like you don't look like a 10 or a 7 in person, you lose the job. So a 10, I mean on a scale of 1 to 10, how pretty are you? So if you're not a 7 or a 10, you don't get the job. And after you get the job, when you're between a 7 or a 10, trust me, every time you will be reminded you got that job because you're pretty, and you have a duty to show your gratitude to your bosses.
So this seems to be a profession where there is a beautometer, if I may just call it.
There is a
beautometer, to measure beauty, perhaps. I'm just
Martin, that will be. I mean, that will be a bit unfair for you.
But I was just trying to
say that.
No, I'm just trying
regarding
to.
This profession.
Yes. I hold lawyers in high esteem, but she seems to raise a very fundamental issue that is not just facing the legal profession.
Yes.
This is spread across the sectors, because the question of sexual harassment and all those kind of things are things that have been reported in this country.
But we must also note, as a legal profession, we are held to a higher standard, both locally and internationally. There's a reason why we are learned friends, not educated friends, which means certain behaviors are unacceptable in the legal profession. It does not matter where you came from. It does not matter what environment you were brought up in. The moment you set foot in the legal profession, your standard, your expectations suddenly go up here.
So, George, you say these are things that baffles you.
Yes.
You are not privy to them.
Yes. Now, let me just say this. I do not want to pretend that I do not know that sexual harassment occurs, not just in the legal profession, but generally in the workforce. I'm meant to believe from what I have heard that actually sometimes you'll get a job, you know, and you'll have to pay for it. But you know what baffles me, as you can see, is the fact that when you hear it firsthand from a colleague,
you know it happens.
Then that's when you know that these things are there. They're not just a reserve of other professions. So that will call for an element, and I've seen in most of the government ministries about the sexual harassment policy, which has been implemented in most of the offices. And I also believe within the Law Society of Kenya, we had some guidelines, if I'm not mistaken, within the judiciary, and by virtue and by extension, the policy must have moved to the Law Society of Kenya against sexual harassment. And it will be very disturbing. It will be very disturbing for you as as a mentor, when a young advocate is looking up to gain experience from you, or a young advocate is trying to make a career, and you're trying to take advantage by virtue of such kind of harassment. That should be an issue. I believe that to any victim, they should stand up and make a report. I know sexual harassment is a big deal in law firms in America. Any small attempt, whether it's a direct attempt or an indirect attempt, it has ramifications that are beyond control.
So the question I should have asked Rose, perhaps, is when some of these things you're saying and the experiences you have had regarding sexual harassment, did you take an initiative to report to LSK? The body that
Here is the funny thing. You cannot report.
Why?
You can't. Because those bosses, those seniors, have friends in those particular positions. Like, for example, he is my senior, as I keep saying, and then he has his friends. So if, for example, you're his friend and you're in the Law Society of Kenya, and I come to report to you, you're going to call him immediately, right? At which point he is going to intimidate me and remind me that I need this job. That is the one thing you're constantly reminded. Unataka kazi ama hautaki. Ikiwa unataka kazi, sit down, keep quiet, and do your work. You cannot report it.
I think, Rose, you'll allow me to interject. Let us not try to create a picture. Perhaps I'm living in an illusionary world. But let us not try to create a picture of, if you report such an act, that you do not report, because if you report, it will not, no one is going to step in to assist you.
Actually, nobody does.
It's the fear of...
Nobody does. And the other thing, there's also the fear of the social stigma. For me, it doesn't matter to me whether you like me or not. If you do something negative to me, of course I'll report. But you see, back then, I did not have this level of confidence to come out and say this is what is happening.
So the question of fear, because just speaking for LSK, because if you fear to report, then LSK's hands are tied in terms of taking an action.
What I have been constantly suggesting, there needs to be an anonymous system of reporting. You see, in the US currently, there's a movement called Me Too. And remember, the US is a first world country, and women have actually better opportunities than we do in Kenya. But the fact that they couldn't report producers who are abusing them until the movement of Me Too came along, tells you how dire the situation is. Now, look at us in Kenya, where we are a patriarchal society, where you're constantly reminded you're a woman, where you're constantly reminded that the short skirt you're wearing is the reason that they can't stop asking you for sexual favors. The fact that the people who are in these leadership positions are actually doing the same thing. The same thing that you want to go and report. The only way that I know people can report is if there's an anonymous system. Because if I go and tell him, the kind of questions I am going to get, what did you do for him to think of you sexually? What were you dressed in? Did you put on makeup? Did you smile at him suggestively? Why would I put myself through that?
I get you. Let's, we have 8 minutes to bring this to an end.
Okay.
I'll give you at the tail end the 3 minutes so that you just try and share the vision you have for the people of Nairobi. LSK I'm talking about. But let me just get your thoughts briefly regarding the arbitration center, because that was another contentious issue in LSK, among members of LSK. What is your view regarding the arbitration center, George?
Of course, the International Center for Arbitration was one of those things you'd want to call dead projects. You know, I mean, it was dead even before.
It was dead on arrival.
It was dead on arrival because if you look at the way that it had been captured and the way they tried, the council was trying to sell it to members. Now, arbitration is one of the several several sectors within which you can practice your law. Then you come up and you want to bulldoze. Now, arbitration is one of the several several sectors within which you can practice your law. Then you come up and you want to bulldoze to other people who are not into arbitration into coming up with something that they will not use. Not use in the sense that they will not benefit from it, but they will not actively enjoy the facilities that are being offered by the arbitration center. So in that respect, there is no way it will have attained the general support, you know, the support of the general membership. And of course, such a thing was meant to die. And
did it pick up?
It didn't pick up. And even as we talk at the moment, I think that's a closed file. There's no one who talks about the International Arbitration Center anymore. Mm-hmm. Even to the people who contributed the money to the LSK.
So they have to be refunded in some way.
Either be refunded, because, you know, there are also legal challenges to the refund. You remember contracts had been signed. Contracts had been signed, and the suppliers or the contractors, some of them had already been, I understand, given deposits or gotten into engagements. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, for me, I tend to look at it from two angles. On the one hand, I agree with my senior. On the other hand, we do have to admit that we have a very litigious society, and some of these cases do need out-of-court handling, if I may call it that. So an arbitration center would have been great. It would have been something great to have. However, the way it was presented to the members wasn't the right way to do it. And the fact that, you remember, senior, you remember they made people pay for the arbitration center. You know, you cannot force somebody to foot the bill for something that to them it doesn't make sense. So the approach should have been different. That's all I can say. Mm-hmm. They should have used a different approach and actually at least try to see what the members think and feel with regard to the arbitration center before imposing it on them.
So it's a good idea that perhaps
that was poorly executed.
Poorly executed, I get you. Let me give you this final minute, George, to just list three key things that any lawyer in Nairobi or across the country who's... let's talk about Nairobi. And what is it you want to do if you elected Nairobi LSK Council representative? If you can just look at this camera.
Well, now, what comes out clearly is that the vision I have for the society is to at least make the welfare of lawyers better in a long-term manner. What we have at the moment, if you go through the manifesto and the visions of all the members of, all the contestants, you'll see all of them are intertwined into the same thing. All of them are talking about welfare without clarifying. They are talking about practice matters without getting into detail on what exactly they are talking about. My manifesto has 3 points. And the 3 points that we are talking about are divided to fit into every member of the society. Some of them are meant for young advocates. Some of them are meant for, let me call it middle age, and some of them for the older advocates. Now, what I have is, number one, there's a scheme that I intend to introduce. I will lobby with the Law Society of Kenya. It's called the Office Space Purchase Scheme, whereby you realize that as advocates, and if you intend to practice your law for more than 10 years, you are better placed purchasing your own office, because in actual sense, even the rent that you are paying for your offices is just similar to flushing it into the toilet, because at the end of 10 years, I've practiced for 7 years. All the rent that I've ever paid, at no point am I going to get any dividends from the rent. So we are coming up with a very solid, a very brave scheme to allow advocates who are 7 years or 5 years up to 30 years into practice, those ones who do not have office space, to look into a model on which they are going to incorporate purchase of office space. The second thing that I'm very keen on is the issue of future-proofing our law firms. What we are talking about future-proofing is what exactly my colleague is talking about. The market that we had for lawyers is slowly sliding into hands of non-lawyers, which is a major concern, because if you've gone to school for all those years and you can actually, and you're not able to practice whatever you learned in school, then it is of no need even you going to school any longer.
I get you.
So what we are looking at is we are coming up with models that are going to future-proof the law firms in this country. And this is a clarion call to all the lawyers and all professionals generally in the country. Let us look at ways we are going to introduce like artificial intelligence into our systems. Let us look at ways we are going to introduce blockchain management in law firms. And lastly, what I wish to say is a vote to George is a vote for prosperity.
Well said, George. Well said. I get you. Let me give Ross the final opportunity to just bring this to an end. What is it you envision, if cleared by LSK, that is?
Okay, my vision is on two prongs. One, the welfare of the Law Society members, including the students at the Kenya School of Law, and two, the tech frontier. One, when it comes to the welfare, and my focus is entirely on the young advocates, because the older advocates are well taken care of. For the young advocates, of course, I'm going to push for a pupillage act that is going to cater for the students who will be at the Kenya School of Law and during the era of pupillage, as well as the young advocates. And if the Law Society of Kenya does not listen to us right now, if I stay bad, then I am going to lobby for a young advocates association away from the Law Society of Kenya, so that if they're not going to take care of us, we'll take care of ourselves. Secondly, the issue of having to pay for practicing certificates and CPD seminars, the continuous development seminars for advocates. That is one of the other things that is killing us as young advocates. Once you get admitted to the bar, you're given a bill of 20,000 to pay for your practicing certificate, and you still have to keep paying 2,500 for each seminar for you to get the 5 points to be able to get a practicing certificate for the following year. In my opinion, as a young advocate, once you get admitted to the bar, you need to be given your certificate of admission to the bar as well as your practicing certificate. That is one of those issues that I am totally not okay with. And furthermore, somebody had introduced the idea of getting an insurance company to give you a loan to pay for your practicing certificate. Where are you going to get the money for this loan? The third thing on the welfare section is the salary for young advocates. That needs to be reviewed. And secondly, we have enough counties that can take in law students as pupils, as interns, and cater for that. Now, jumping over to the tech section.
As we bring this to an end, in 10 seconds.
Jumping over to the tech section, I am going to be pushing for use of technology in the Law Society of Kenya, including there is no need for you to constantly go for these CPD seminars at Hilton or Panari. You can get your training via a webinar. Access it from wherever you are. Secondly, access to lawyers need to be made easier. I have gone ahead and created the app that I told you about called Lawyer, L-O-Y-A, that lets a non-lawyer access a lawyer immediately straight from their Android device. So these are the things that I am looking at. This is the future that I am looking at. A vote for Rose is a vote for the future, a revolution.
So a vote for George is a vote for prosperity, is a vote for a revolution. That's what we know. Same thing. And the jury is out there. The lawyers will be voting on February 22nd. I want to thank you, George Omwansa, for getting time to be with us today, and I appreciate and I want to wish you well. And Rose, Wavinya, Wanjala, we want to wish you well as a young advocate. May the best candidate win. You're going for the same position. May the best candidate win is what we'll only say, and we want to wish you well as you do the campaign. So we'll be there as KBC Channel 1 on February 22nd to see who's going to emerge the winner. And we wish lawyers all the best, especially those vying for various positions, all the best as you go for those positions. And I hope some of the issues they have been articulating are going to be canvassed for those who are going to take over. My name is Martin Mwanje on behalf of Safina Cheng and Samuel Njeroge, and on behalf of the entire production and technical team that made this a success. Good Morning Kenya resumes tomorrow early morning. That is from 6 all the way to 9. Stay tuned. This is KBC Channel 1. Enjoy the rest of the programming. Bye-bye for now.